as you heard me telling the younger children, we are now going to be sharing passages from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's I've Been to the Mountaintop. That was the final speech that he gave on April 3rd, the day before he was assassinated. And so I invite all of the youth who are going to be proclaiming with me to come on forward. And if you would line up in order, that would probably be the most help. So John, if you'd be willing to begin. It's kind of late to ask, huh? So we'll have you right here, and then everyone will line up behind you. Into the mic. Okay. And we'll wait until everyone's lined up before you begin. Come on up to the mic. Come on behind.
Something is happening in Memphis. Something is happening in our world. And you know, if I were standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the whole human history up until now, and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt across the Red Sea, through the wilderness and towards the promised land. And in spite of its magnificence, I would stop there.
I would even go watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 Theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. I would come up to 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there.
Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy.
Now, that is a strange statement to make, because this world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble in this land, confusion all around. That is a strange statement to make. But I know somehow that only when it can get dark enough, you can see the stars. And I am willing to see God working in this period of the 20th century in the way that people in some strange ways are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, responding. Something, and wherever they assemble today, whether in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, they'll always cry the same: we want to be free.
We mean business now, and we are determined to gain our rightful place in God's world. And that's all this whole thing is about. We aren't engaged in any negative protests and in any negative arguments with anybody. We are saying that we are determined to be people. We are saying that we are God's children, and that we are God's children. We don't have to live like we are forced to live.
Now, what does this all mean? In this great period of history, it means that we've got to stay together. We've got to stay together and maintain unity. You know, whenever pharaohs want to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, we have a favorite formula for doing it. What was that? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves, but whenever the slaves got together, something happened in Pharaoh's camp, and he could not hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves got together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity.
Now about injunctions. We have an injunction and we're going into court tomorrow morning to fight this illegal and unconstitutional injunction. All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even in Russia, a totalitarian country, maybe it can understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe it can understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they had committed themselves to that over there.
But somewhere I read of a freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read a freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read the greatness of America. It is the right for protest for rights. And so just as I say, we aren't going to let dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. We are going on.
Now the other thing we'll have to do is this. Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal.
We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around with our bad words. We don't need any bricks or bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and massive industries in our country and say God sent us by here to say that you're not treating his children right. And we've come by here to ask to make your first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned.
Now if you are not prepared to do that, we do not have an agenda that we must follow, and our agenda calls for withdrawal economic support from you.
Now, let me say as I move to my conclusion that we've got to see this struggle through until the end.
We've got to see it through, and when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness.
The question before you tonight is not if I stop and help the sanitation workers, what will happen to my job. It is not if I help the sanitation workers, what will happen to all the hours that I usually spend in my office every day and every week. The question is not if I stop to help the man in need, what will happen to me. The question is, if I do not stop and help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That's the question.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days. These days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation, and I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you.
Today, when I got into Memphis, some began to make threats and talk about threats that were out there. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers?
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, we will get to the promised land.
And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming Lord.